Welcome to the Grassroots Army Podcast. This platform is for common sense people looking for up-to-date, accurate, and truthful information without the hot garbage corporate media bias. The power of one can lead to the power of many. You never know what small act that you may say or do that may literally change the lives of millions tomorrow. And don't you ever think that you can't make a difference, because you can. Good afternoon, my fellow Michiganders. Good afternoon, my fellow Americans. Welcome to the Grassroots Army Podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Garrett Soldano. And who do I have here with me today is Mike Rogers, which I've heard, and the rumor mill is going crazy, Mike, that you may have some good news on Monday.
Listen, we think we're ready to take Michigan back. 32 years it's been since we've had a conservative in the Senate advocating for the people of Michigan. This is our time to win. And so I think there will be good news on Monday. And man, are we coalescing around the state. Just our initial, hey, should we do this, calling around the state has been just off the chart. People are fired up and ready to go. And when you come off an election 48.6 to 48.3, people are ready to get that 0.3% back.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting cycle, that's for sure. And I think it's the first time ever that it is a Senate and a gubernatorial race, correct?
Open. Yeah, we haven't had that, certainly in modern politics, for sure.
So it is obviously very important, and especially very important with the congressional races. I mean, it's up and down the ticket, period. The Attorney General, Secretary of State. I mean, what happens here in the state of Michigan in 2026 is literally going to shape our state for the next 2 decades. And so it's so important to get the right people in the office. So I want to go into the 2024 election because, like you said, it was very slim. I mean, you lost by approximately, 19,000 votes?
Yeah.
And so that must have been a tough 24 hours after the election. You went to bed and things are looking good. You wake up, what the heck happened, right?
Well, not to mention the very unusual truckload of ballots showing up at 4 a.m. in Detroit, right?
Yeah,
we were winning up to that point. So, we learned a lot in this go round, and so we feel much better prepared to go after this thing. And here's something: there's a lot of misinformation about this, and there's a lot of Democrat activists telling you they're conservatives, putting things out that are absolutely wrong. So I'm going to straighten some of that out right now. We got more Republican votes than any other statewide Michigan candidate in the history of the state, number one. And I'll tell you why that's important here in a minute. Number two, we came closest to Trump votes. So nobody matched Trump votes anywhere in the country, because there's these things, the people called no propensity voters. They won't vote for anyone else. They come in, they vote for Trump, they leave. We got closer to Trump votes than any other, the competitive U.S. Senate seats, and even got more than Ted Cruz. I got closer to Trump votes than Ted Cruz did in Texas. And so some notion that, we fell below the baseline is not true. We actually overperformed to get that 0.3% close to this win. And all of those become really, really important in how we're going to win in the midterm. Think of this: we only need to get 85% of people who already voted for me to show up at the poll and vote. That would be about 51% on our modeling of a midterm election turnout. That's huge for us. This is a huge opportunity for Republicans and conservatives who want to help cement what Donald Trump is doing right now. Because, 111 executive orders, amazing. He did that. He set a record. But we also now, the next team, it's just like taking the beach. The next wave has to come in to make sure we hold the ground and improve the ground, and make improvement on the size and scope of government, on tax cuts, on all of the waste and fraud and abuse they're finding. We now need to do some legislating to protect that from not happening again. And so this is why this election is so important for Michigan and conservatives. And again, a lot of people out there who are candidly Democrat activists playing in our wheelhouse here, and we can't let that happen. To make sure that we get this thing done, we win for conservatives in Michigan and Michigan values.
Unfortunately, what you just said is a lot of people aren't aware that they have literally infiltrated a lot of our parties and party politics, and they've done this in battleground states. And it's unfortunate. And that's all they do is sow division and hate. And unfortunately, we attack each other. And a lot of people out there will continue to spread this division. And I want to hit on also what you said, because there's obviously a lot of great things. It seems like every time we wake up in the morning, it's something new and improved with our country. And I made a video yesterday is how can even, and if you call yourself an American, you can't be excited about what President Trump and his cabinet and his team are doing with Doge and everything else, with the tax cuts, and even with the tariff battle that's going on. He's really putting China in the corner and allowing them to hopefully save face if they come and just, all right, what do we need to do? Can you hit on any of those?
Oh God, yes, absolutely. Hey, my favorite one, I just voted, I think yesterday, so that we could continue to have hot showers. Remember that Biden, it sounds crazy, but that Biden rule that said you couldn't have gas-fired, water heaters to heat your shower. They did away with that. So
didn't they do it with the flow too? Like there's no more like governors on your water.
On the shower. Yeah.
Make showers great again.
Take a real shower that's hot the way you like it. Welcome back to America, people. I love it. That's right. This is critical. Those two things really, really important for the future of the country. But if you think about what he's done on terror, and listen, I know it's hard. It's shocking to me how many people want him to fail on that, including Democrats. I guess they'd rather have our jobs in China and pay for 39 cents less for their plastic toys. I don't understand how the Democrats, and B, even some in our own party, walking away from this notion that we should have fair trade. It can't be what we've been doing for the last 30 years, because we've been taken to the cleaners. I mean, you think about it in South Korea. Our troops have been a tripwire for North Korea for 50 years, and they still won't allow our cars in at an equitable rate to be sold in South Korea. That's wrong. And so when the president and Wall Street saying, "Oh, they're our ally," yes, they are, but they're not being fair in trade. And so there's a reason that there's not a lot of American cars in Germany. They won't let them in. We're from Michigan, so we should pitch the car piece right now and pitch it hard. And so what happened in the last few days, let me just tell you what happened. So, the market's tanked. All of that's hard. It's really hard. If you have a 401k, it's, as I told my wife the other day, don't look at it. It's like a 180K now. We don't want to look at it, but it will come back. The market will come back. He's now got all of these, the Europeans who should have been on our side a long time ago, now pushing back on the Chinese. He just flipped the script on these folks. The Chinese walked right into it. And guess what? We're going to win this thing. And when you start adding on top of that, so now we're going to get, when countries like Vietnam come back and say 0% tariffs, India, Argentina, now others are starting to come in. They said they had 70 countries show up at the White House saying, we're ready to deal on this. That's a win for American manufacturing. That's an absolute win. It means that we now can compete in these markets where they were artificially keeping us out of those markets, even though they were in our market. And so I think this is going to be huge I think it's a reset, or kind of a renaissance of American manufacturing. And think of it, 80% of drivetrain and motors aren't produced in the United States anymore, of any car you drive. 80%. That's not sustainable. It's not sustainable for our national security. And the president is making some really hard, difficult decisions, and he's winning. We should all celebrate. I don't care if you are a Democrat and liberal. They're confused. They don't even know who they are now. Now they're advocating, no, it's okay to keep those tariffs on so that those jobs stay in China or Vietnam. I don't get it. I don't understand. Go ahead. You keep taking that route. This is really important for the future of the country. It's going to be hard. It's going to be some bumps, but I'm really, the way he's done this is pretty masterful.
No, with the Democrats and liberals, it's just all emotion. What's going to get the clicks that day? There's no foresight. There's no logic. There's no common sense. And those are the things that I think the majority of Americans made it very clear. And I've said this on several of my podcasts with other guests on the show, is like, you would have thought after the 2024 election, they would have gotten to a room and said, okay, that narrative did not work. The messaging was horrible. That's what cost us all these races. We shouldn't be really focused on men competing in women's sports and boys using girls' locker rooms and restrooms. And they've doubled down on it. I mean, they've really doubled down on every single thing. That's almost, and I've kind of analyzed this, Mike. It's like before Musk bought Twitter, Elon Musk bought Twitter, they had their echo chamber, and conservatives like you and I on all these social media platforms. I went through this, got deplatformed several times on everything.
So did we, by the way, in the last
Yeah.
election.
So whenever you stood up to these types of things, they would you would get censored or deplatformed. And when Elon Musk bought Twitter, everything changed. Everything changed. So now they're getting held accountable and they don't know what the hell's going on. It's quite comical and very enjoying to watch. Don't get me wrong, but it's interesting how they doubled down. And that's one of the things that, you know, when Alyssa Slotkin was running and you were running against her, nobody really held her accountable. I mean, there's a couple things in the debate that's thrown, but do you think that this time around with Mallory McMorrow, are you really going to start hammering those types of issues on her?
Well, listen, and you guys didn't get to see it in the West Side, but we really hammered home the men and women's sports issue big in the Detroit media market. We went after her pretty hard. And what was interesting is our numbers were moving pretty significantly. You know, we joked with our campaign team, like, geez, if we only had like 3 more weeks, we would have won, because all of our numbers were going the right way. What we've done is said we're going to have to start hammering them early. We're going to take the bark off of them early. And, you know, McMorrow is an easy target. She is a fiery, flaming liberal from New Jersey who came to Michigan in 2018 and now wants to be our senator, and bringing all those liberal New Jersey values with her. And, you know, listen, we ought to be able to highlight the differences pretty easily. And we think we have a pretty good plan, we think, to get out there early on this, to make sure that they're held accountable for where they're at. I mean, again, think of these are Michigan lawmakers. So there's another congresswoman thinking about getting in and running on the Democrat side, who's pushing back on the tariffs. And I keep saying, great, you're advocating for China to have these jobs. They say, well, it's not bringing as many jobs as you think. Oh, so you'd rather have 10 Chinese jobs and no American jobs, or would you rather have 2 American jobs? I don't understand their logic. And I think they don't understand it either. I mean, they used to be for tariffs at one point. Now they're not. And listen, ideally, you want no tariffs. That's the goal. And that's where the president's going. 0 tariffs. We want to charge you. You don't charge us. Let's compete, man. That's America. And That's where he's getting us to. And so we're going to take the bark. We're going to take that fight right to him every single day on the campaign.
Well, let's talk about that, because this is always the elephant in the room with any candidate, is that magical word called fundraising, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you can have the greatest message, you can be the best looking guy or girl, and if you don't get on now social media buying spots and corporate media, you're dead in the water. And so you're saying, like, right out of the cannon here, we're going to be attacking them nonstop. So you need fundraising to do that. And this race, which is, I mean, for the amount of money that's going to be coming in here in the state of Michigan for this next cycle, I've heard astronomical dollars, up to $1 billion when you add all the races together, which is just insane to me. But it's fundraising. And so do you think you're going to have any donor burnout? Do you think you're going to still be able to activate that voting base? Because I was with you on the trail when we did our Grassroots Army Trail, our tour. You have one heck of a good ground game. It was very impressive. Yeah. So my question is fundraising, and are you going to be able to activate and put together that infrastructure, which I'm assuming is already there, but to get those folks fired up again in a non-presidential cycle?
Yes. So, and this is going to be key. That ground game is going to be exceptionally important. So we have a commitment from some groups to come in and help us with building up our ground game. We had the best ground game in the country, and we put it up against, it was really phenomenal. And by the way, a ground game isn't from a candidate, it's from the grassroots. It's from people who care enough about their country to go out and knock on a door and drop off a piece of literature. That's who is important in that equation. Well, we're going to have the ability to ramp that thing up in a very big way in discussions that we've had about people who are interested in coming in and helping us get out the vote. Ground game, building, get out the vote, ballot chase, registering voters. There's some folks that should be voting for us that just aren't registered. We're going to help get them registered and get them turned out. That's key. We have to start. The reason we're thinking about, as you said, sharing some good news on Monday, you have to get in early to raise enough money. 70% of our money last go round happened after the primary. So I know there's a lot of people say, oh, it's great. Well, we had a primary. four-way primary. I won with 65%. So some notion that the Republican Party isn't for Mike Rogers is nonsense. And again, a lot of Democrat activists and libertarians who don't want any Republican to win, by the way. And so when you get through that, 70% of that money came after August. It meant that we were outspent about 10-1 in September on TV, 10-1. Because they had money, that money will be wheelbarrowed in, driving in by semi trucks and dumped in their lap. We don't have that option as conservatives and Republicans. We have to do it the old-fashioned way. We have to go out and ask people. And yeah, it's hard work. And so if we, our argument is we're going to get in early. We think that folks are going to see that we're the clear candidate that can put something this big and complicated together to win. And implement and be that second wave for Trump to get things done. And so we're going to start early. We're going to raise money pretty aggressively. And in the early part of the campaign, you have to raise money early. If we get in the same circumstance where you have, you're raising your money after a primary, nobody will win this. No conservative Republican will win this state. Won't happen. It's too late. Again, you need to be up on TV. They came up on TV in August and didn't go down on us until, literally the day after the election. I saw an ad after the day after the election. I went, wow, that's a lot of money. And so we can't let that happen again. Imagine if we were just on par with where they were, we would have won. And we would have had the ability to message versus fighting amongst ourselves. And so this is going to be really, really important that we move out. We're going to be the 800-pound gorilla on the freight train coming down the track. And we're going to tell the Democrats, we're here to take the bark off. We're going to win. And we're going to go make sure that Donald Trump's plan to make sure the government is held accountable, waste, abuse, corruption, gone. Got to double down on that. Taxes, energy independence, and hot showers. Come on. Doesn't get better than that.
I like me some heavy, heavy hot showers. That's for sure. I want to touch base on something what you said with the Libertarian Party. They put out, and I took a screenshot of it on Twitter. They are obviously very unhappy with you running. They're going to do everything they can to stop you from winning, it looks like. Okay. And so I kind of dug a little bit on some of the issues that they had a problem with you about. And some of the conservatives too. I saw a lot of these things come up with your history in Congress and being on committees. And, when you did that little short stint on working with CNN for a bit, the Communist News Network, as I say it. But I just kind of want to get the elephant out of the room and hear it from the horse's mouth, what you have to say about these things, because there's so many times people spread rumors. We have people who have infiltrated our party. They're constantly saying all this stuff. I wanted to give you an opportunity to say, hey, yeah, this happened and this is why, and moving forward, just to answer some of these questions. And the first one is, how are you going to reassure conservatives, okay, mainly, that are really concerned with your background in surveillance, especially with your support with CISPA, CISPA, that have obviously expanded governmental surveillance?
Yeah. So that's actually a misnomer. So let me back up. Right after the 2011, we had this huge problem in the country. What we found out was, according to U.S. law, that and remember, the World Wide Web works worldwide. So you could send me an email. I'm in White Lake, Michigan today. You're in, on the west side. You send me an email. It could go to Canada, to Great Britain, back to me in White Lake, right? That's the way the World Wide Web works. And a lot of people don't understand that. It doesn't stay in the United States. It could, but it always finds the quickest way to get to where they're going and the least resistance. So depending on what's going on, it could go all the way around the world before it even gets here. What we found out was that a server in New York, say it bumped off of New York before it went to Great Britain, that server was considered a U.S. person. So if a terrorist was sending an email from a Hamas terrorist was sending an email to somebody on the border of Mexico saying, I want you to go on this operation, but it touched that New York server and went down, they had to build a full case to get a full warrant from a judge. And as somebody who went through the warrant process, it should be hard. It has to be hard. And it's hard for a reason to protect U.S. citizens. And I believe that passionately as a guy who enforce that law. And we said, that's ridiculous. If it's a foreigner to a foreigner, I don't think they deserve the rights of a United States citizen. And this is where it got all messed up along the way. People didn't realize what they were condemning. So that's why the first initial surge of that changed to say, if it's a foreigner to a foreigner, you don't have to go through and get a full warrant just because it touches a U.S. server. That wouldn't make any sense I don't think it makes sense to anybody here. You don't want terrorists using that as a loophole to blow us up. I just don't believe that. And so that's how all of that got started. And what CISPA was designed to do was share information, malware. I'm in the cybersecurity business, so I know this pretty well. I don't want to get into too much in the detail, but I think a little detail here is really important.
Yes.
When a piece of malware was coming into the country from Russia or Iran, or a cyber criminal in Eastern Europe trying to steal your stuff, it would hit the ISPs, the people who provide you your internet, right? AT&T is an example, or anybody else you get it through, any cable company, all of that. And so what happens is that bill was designed to say, if you see a piece of malware, a machine, not a person, sees malware that's configured with it's called a signature that we would recognize as malware, like that's going to do something really bad to somebody, you could share that information with the intended target. Before you did this, the FBI would come and knock on your door on Monday, say, yeah, we saw it come in. It's in your network. Gosh, I hope it didn't steal everything in your network. My argument is, why do we do that? Why don't we share the malware? It's no emails, no human being. It's all machine to machine. And you wanted it as high up in the chain as you could, because you don't want to get the government reading your emails. The government shouldn't read your emails. And so that was just and people took that, and libertarians lost their mind. But if you stop and think about what we were trying to accomplish with that, and again, nothing should be set and forget in the federal government. Nothing. And that's why I was working with Trump and the others last year about how you get the Patriot Act back under control. What happened was the FBI went out and did their own thing. I mean, they violated their own rules, not once, not twice, but tens of thousands of times. And so it had to be brought back in. That was never intended to go against U.S. citizens. So some notion that I'm for free surveillance on U.S. citizens is absolute nonsense. And this is a guy, listen, that put together warrants against, terrorists and criminals and gangsters. So I know how it's supposed to work, and I would never jeopardize that in our Fourth Amendment protections, for sure.
I want to hit on a couple of things, because I think most Americans, number one, I didn't realize that. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. But yeah, if you're not a citizen, you don't have rights over here.
I don't think so.
I'm sorry. You don't. Like, you don't have rights.
Libertarians do, by the way. Libertarians think that you can come across the border, you can do all of that stuff. Everybody is just like everybody else. I just don't believe that.
No, I don't either.
You're not an American.
Especially with Biden's open border policy on how many bad people got in here. I mean, it's a mess. But I also understand too is, if we talk about Edward Snowden, right, and what the NSA and stuff was doing, that's where people get so sensitive, and going through everything with the pandemic, with the FBI and what they were doing, and how it was weaponized against President Trump. You and I talked about that on our first interview long ago, when you first announced last time, on how you were part of the old school FBI in the 90s, the guys that went after serial killers and bank robbers and mob bosses and everything else. But I just think we've gotten to such a corner, and a lot of people have lost all faith in our government, and we don't want our government spying on us. We don't want our government coming.
And I don't think they should, by the way, either. And so think of this: in the FBI that I was in, we didn't even have the internet. So, we were old-fashioned gumshoe. If you want to take down gangsters and human traffickers and drug dealers, which I have done all of those things, including get the warrant, kick in the door, and drag a Colombian off to jail. Pretty dangerous characters back there when I was there in Chicago. All of that I did. That was the FBI. That was the right FBI, because they did it properly. You never lied. You never did any of that. What happened is they got into all of this electronic stuff, and they brought in a bunch of people who weren't agents necessarily. I mean, I guess they're agents. They went through the training, but they're sitting in a room on a computer, right? I would have lost my mind had I sat in a room on a computer as an FBI. I couldn't have done it. But what happened is they kept saying, well, gosh, if we just fudge a little bit here, we get a little more information. And boy, if we just fudge here a little bit, we get a little more information. And there was no catch on that. None of that happened while I was chairman. I'll guarantee you that. It all happened right subsequent after. So the last part of the Obama administration. And even, I think even Trump's first term, they were having a hard time getting their arms around it because a lot of people didn't understand how the FBI was kind of getting around what they were supposed to do. Then Biden got in, and boy, it went right back to that on steroids. And so that's why I think it's so important to have somebody that understands how technology works and how the government can abuse that technology to do things against its citizens. Because I'm passionately opposed to that. There's a right way to do law enforcement and a wrong way. They were doing it the wrong way. And matter of fact, it created a culture in the Bureau that allowed tens of thousands of instances where they violated their own rules. When I was in, that'd be unheard of. I mean, some agent would be dragged out, and I'm not kidding. They would be dragged out of the building. I mean, they just never tolerated it. So that culture changed. And so some nonsense that they call this surveillance thing is just wrong. Now, I do believe this is important, and so did Donald Trump, and so did Kash Patel, and so did Tulsi Gabbard. They need the tool to go after foreigners who are communicating with foreigners. That's why they reauthorized Patriot Act with the guardrails. Now, libertarians still don't agree with that. I get that. But I don't know how else you stop them from killing Americans. And I don't believe that they should get one right that we don't have. Now, there's this kind of movement in the libertarian movement that says they believe that people, if you're here, you get treated like everyone else, foreigner or not. I just don't believe that. That's a sure way to get us all killed.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to be a part of any of that. And I think too, to play the devil's advocate, even with the judicial system, right? We've seen the weaponization of the judicial system, and even with these laws into place, and like you said, you got to earn a warrant. Well, if you have a corrupt judge, let's say, hey, they don't like conservatives, right? There are judges out there who are not bipartisan. They really rule on their political beliefs. And so if they have these kind of things in place where they can just go to that judge and then the warrant is administered, and then there's going to be another level of government interfering with our everyday lives. Number one, how do you combat that? How do you stand up against that? And obviously you said you're not for something like that. It should be legal and everything else. So I guess my point is you're 100% against spying on Americans without the warrant.
Completely.
All right. But if there is a warrant.
No, actually not 100, 150. I mean, okay. We should never spy on Americans without a warrant. A constitution gives us a framework to do that. Right. And getting a warrant, and remember this, I've done this, getting a warrant, it's a long process. It would take us months to get a warrant, to actually go and either, say, I'm going to search this person's home. And it should be that hard. It absolutely should be that hard because it was against a U.S. citizen. You have to, you go through all the predicates of probable cause and all of that. And you have to prove it. And what I thought that worked best about this system is I would have to bring it, as they said, it's an 8.5, 11 argument, meaning it has to fit on that sheet of paper. So you don't get to go in and tell the judge something else that's not on that paper, right? And what it seems to me like we have more activist judges, and I argue it's part of the problem of, but listen, when we lose elections, when people say don't vote for Republicans, we get liberal judges get activists on the bench. I really don't understand those folks who think that's the right solution for America, because I think they've done more harm than they've ever done good. It may make them feel good to screed on a tweet, but you have actually hurt this state and this country immeasurably when you do this. And so now we're having to go back. Matter of fact, there's a new movement to try to make sure the Congress puts back on the jurisdictions of these courts. You can't have a district judge in Ohio ruling on an issue that impacts Arizona. That was never designed for that. And so that is a legislative thing that we have to do. That's why you want to send somebody that knows how it works, won't take any BS. They can't blow smoke up my skirt to go back and fix these things. And they're hard, but you got to be willing to fight for them. And I'm certainly going to be willing to do that, because I think it's important you protect the ability to get a warrant the right way. right? If you want American communities safe, you got to be able to have the opportunity to go to a judge, an independent judge who rules on the facts to see if you can get a warrant. And that's going to take work. If this whole thing has kind of gotten sloppy, right? I mean, it's gotten sloppy. We got to really tighten it all back up.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's such a gray area now. And I think that's why so many people are sensitive, and they can start to run down these rabbit holes with these things and create these theories and stuff, because, we are just one judge away from losing our rights as American citizens. I mean, I went through that during the pandemic and everything else, even with the FBI visiting me because I was a radical right-wing extremist. It just took a phone call for that to happen. And obviously everything that went on with the January 6th fiasco, and it just goes on and on. And I think that's why
the Bureau should have never been used that way. Never. It was never intended to do that. Should never do that. They should be out, catching, methamphetamine dealers in your schools. That's what they need to be doing.
And it seems like that's where cash is getting them directed back, and Deputy Director Dan Bongino. So and I think that's where we're excited, but we're also cautious, Mike. We want this train to continue to go forward. We want the cuts in government to get limited, right? And I think people are just so scared that if we bring somebody that was a part of the old establishment, the old Republican Party, because I think the Republican Party now is new and improved. There's a lot more moderates in there that love this country and love this flag, that we're going to go back to that kind of way of thinking, like the Bush era and everything else. And I think that's why people are ultra sensitive when we have somebody with your past that's running again.
You mean the guy that introduced countervailing duties on China in the early 2000s to push back on him? Got me disinvited from the Chamber of Commerce meetings in Washington. You mean that guy?
Yeah.
Like, this is nonsense. You have to look at exactly what the work that they did. And I'm very proud of the work that we did to defend America when I was chairman of the Intelligence Committee. Remember, we had 2 wars going on. Oh, and by the way, I cut the intelligence budget. A lot of these stories that you hear all came out of the deep state folks who were so damn mad at me for cutting 10% out of the intelligence budget at the height of Iraq and Afghanistan, because I went in and said, that's wasteful. That doesn't make sense. Why are we spending money doing that? And by the way, made a pretty big impact. Matter of fact, by the time I was done, it was a $78 billion budget when I started. We cut $11 billion. The first tranche was about 7.5, or that's roughly that 10%. And then over time, we found more money. Right now, that thing exploded after, and when I left, everything exploded. So I'd be careful about that, because I get it, right? But there's work that happened that was really, really important, like figuring out. We were the first go round to actually cut. I argued you shouldn't be a chairman of a committee at that time. This was not very popular either. If you can't reauthorize your department, and the reason you reauthorize is the same reason I did it, is because that's when you find places to cut. I mean, so many of these committee chairmen never reauthorized their departments. The Department of Homeland Security hasn't been reauthorized since it was since it got created. There's a committee chairman that should be driving that to cut. It can't be just DOGE. Guess what? Elon Musk is going to go back to the business sector. And we're going to have all of these great cuts. I think this is going to continue. And this is our chance to modernize government and make those cuts permanent. But you can't do it if you walk away from it and let them all go away, and we all go back to saying, well, it's done, it's fixed, we don't have to worry about it. That's wrong. You got to get the next generation, and then the next generation that's going to come in and cement these things. And you probably should pick the guy who actually has done it. I did it before it was popular. I'll guarantee you that. As a matter of fact, I took more arrows from both teams back then, by the way, when I cut the intelligence budget. A lot of people didn't like it, but we got it done. Countervailing duties, that was the first concept of trying to get after China, because they were stealing our auto parts business right here in Michigan. Didn't get very far, because I had, that was definitely an uphill climb. And candidly, we couldn't have gotten where we are if it weren't for a guy like Donald Trump, who was able to go in there and just knock over tables, saying, I don't give a damn. I'm going to fix it. Everyone else talked about it. I'm going to do it. And so a lot of those issues are really important about who a person is and how they governed. And I believe that I left on my own. I could still be in Congress if I wanted. I left on my own because I think our founding fathers said, serve, go out in the private sector, and if you can, come back. Guess what? That's exactly what I'm doing. In the last few years, I've been in the cybersecurity business, protecting people's privacy and their civil liberties and their security from cyber criminals in Iran and China and Russia. So I put my record against anybody who's chirping out there on their thing. They've got some misnomer. And by the way, be careful not to get swayed by these folks who claim to be conservatives and have never supported a Republican of any stripe, sense, or form. And they're out there saying, vote for Democrats, don't vote for this guy. That's just dangerous. That's how we lose.
Yes. And like, we have to get back to what Ronald Reagan said. And I've been very vocal and been taking arrows for saying this, like, hey, if you and I agree on 80% of the issues, we're allies and we're friends. We have to get away from this mentality that this candidate has to be 100% perfect. It's not going to happen. Nobody's perfect, you know. And
well,
if
you find that perfect candidate, don't you think you ought to marry that person, for God's sake?
Absolutely. And I want to go into Congress real quick, if you have some time, because we have a lot of people that are currently in Congress, and obviously every single seat matters. And a lot of these folks are jumping ship. A lot of these folks are new in the arena of Congress, and they're jumping ship and running for all levels of office, like governor and everything else. What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, it took us a long time to get a conservative majority in the House of Representatives. I think we have that conservative majority in the House of Representatives. I cannot tell you how important that is to make sure that Donald Trump can get the kind of programs he can get done. I'll give a great example. They just passed the blueprint for the tax cuts and the budget cutting. I know there was some consternation back there, but if you don't get that step, you don't get any of the good stuff that's coming. And so when people walk away and jeopardize, I think the House, listen, it's their decision. It's hard to run for office. It's miserable. Everybody decides they're smarter than you, and you're a bad person for the 15 different ways. All of that happens in politics. And so I don't begrudge anybody who thinks that it's time for them to do something different. But I will tell you, I hope people think long and hard about it. The biggest impact they can have is right now, when we have a president willing to have the courage to do the things he's doing, and we have a majority in the Senate. This is our time. So I would think long and hard before you walk away from being part of the solution on fixing this thing for some period of time. I worry about it. You know, listen, the midterms is not good to the House of Representatives. We may only get 2 years. I hate to say that. We ought to fight like hell for every seat all over the country, and I think we have good reasons to fight for them in the next 2 years. But if we only have these next 2 years to actually get this stuff cemented in and get done, man, don't walk away from it. This is the time to be there, to be in the fight, to get it done.
So it's fantastic to hear you say that. And so obviously you are agreeing with everything that Elon Musk is doing right now with the cuts and getting rid of wasteful spending and everything else, correct?
Not only wasteful, but abusive spending. Some of the things they're finding, some of this money was going to USAID, that this is our taxpayer dollars going to USAID, that they were turning around giving to non-NGOs. And there are some good NGOs out there. I've watched them work, and they're getting food to people who need to eat. That's great. But they were siphoning off this money and giving it to organizations that were helping people, illegals, come across the border. Our own money. They found that. It should be gone, and we got to keep looking and keep finding it. And by the way, it was really important, and this is so important for all of us and all the conservatives listening. There is not going to be cuts to benefits in Social Security or Medicare, and they're going to protect Medicaid. They've said it. The president have said it. Mike Johnson, Speaker Johnson, said it this morning. He's reiterated it. What they're doing is saying, if it takes you 10 people to do one person's job in Social Security, why should we pay for that? That's what's jeopardizing the health of Social Security. So get rid of a dead weight, modernize it, and make sure that those benefits are getting to people who need it. Those are good cuts. Those are smart cuts. Every business, every person listening to this has been through this in their company at one point or another. And so but it won't happen if we don't keep sending people back who understand how you have to legislate. It can't be just the president by himself. In 4 years, I hope it's a a long-term Republican conservative majority forever. It's not, history tells us that's not going to happen. So we've got to make sure you legislate these things and make it much more difficult for the Democrats to re-put back into place what they've done to the American people.
Well, let's go into the debt. Obviously, it's just astronomical. It continues to get worse. And even with your voting record in the past, I mean, you voted for a lot of higher spending and debt levels during your time. I think the Heritage score had you a little over 50% on that kind of voting record. What do you have to say to the folks out there that look at your past and say, well, Mike, holy cow, man, you were one of the people that were just continually increasing our debt?
So I will never, ever apologize for giving the resources to our troops who are in combat anywhere in the world. And it offended me as somebody who wore the uniform. I was an officer in the United States Army. When I watched members of Congress who had never served say, oh, tough, we probably should just cut or not pay or postpone the budget. For those people and their families, I thought that was just damn near close to treasonous. If you look at the way we were voting, because we put in the reconciliation process, we were pretty flat on all the government funding. Where that money came in was the funding that we had for Iraq and Afghanistan. Like it or not, we could debate that all day long. Should we have been there? All of that's fair game. But you never leave a soldier in the field without every resource to win the fight and come home. I won't ever apologize for that, ever. And so, and I'll take that fight to anybody that wants to have it. You look at the spending that we did on the regular course of government. Like I said, even in my intelligence budget, I cut it 10% in the first whack. That's how we get there. Well, we need to make sure we're not in those conflicts. We need to make sure that Ukraine comes to a peace agreement. I think that's huge. But we have to continue to look at what the real record is versus this nonsense. And if you look at how we got to $36 trillion, it didn't happen while I was in Congress. It happened after I left. And that's why I want to go back. I have the skill set and the resources and the determination and the grit to actually grind this thing out and get where we need to go. But again, I'll fight that fight any day of the week.
Well, I think that's one thing people are concerned about too. Like even President Trump's first term, the spending was still out of control, and people just want it to be stopped. And with Elon Musk and Doge and everything else, I think they're in the right direction, and that's why I think it's so important. And thank you for bringing it up. That it's just not this last election cycle. So many people have picked up their ball and went home. We have decades of work, and I agree with you. A lot of these folks who are kind of using the politics in the positions as a stair step to higher positions at this time, I think is a lot of self-interest, and it's not right. I mean, this country needs these people to stay in place so we can have a majority and play the long game with these things. But unfortunately, other people have other plans at this moment. And, and hopefully the people hold them accountable and ask them those tough questions, because I want to know that as a constituent, why are you doing this? Why are you getting into this race?
You should have to explain it. I'm willing to explain all of those votes, but people, we should have to explain it. I think that's all part of government. Matter of fact, I've said, just like I walked away after 14 years in Congress because I thought it was somebody else's turn and I didn't want to be there forever. I'm going to serve 2 terms, and we're going to get the state ready for someone to walk in and do the same great work. We're going to rebuild the party so that we can continue conservative elections for the future, so we don't do what happened just 2 years ago, or 22, I guess it was now, right? Where we lost the state Senate for the first time in 40 years, lost the state House, lost every statewide office. And look what happened. We had judges have to refer to her, people by their different name. We had men in women's sports going in locker rooms. They took the budget from like a 40 or 50% increase. And by the way, didn't fix the damn roads.
Yeah.
Right. You look at and our education went down, and under Democrats in this state, we've lost 27,000 manufacturing jobs. So I hope people really start looking themselves in the mirror. If you're doing this for sport and you want to, it's fun for you, that's great. I'm not doing this for sport. I have 2 kids. My son just got out of the United States Navy. He was a Navy officer. my daughter's in occupational therapy. I'm going to tell you something. That future for them is something we better fight for every single day today. If we don't, if you walk away, if you decide, well, it's okay, I don't like this person for that thing, I'm going to vote for a Democrat, you're never, you weren't a conservative anyway, in my book. And you are part of the problem. Are you willing to have another generation of kids graduate that can't read at the 6th grade level? Are you willing to make sure that businesses are packing up and flying out of here as fast as we can? And think about it, in that last decade since I left, we've been flat in our GDP in Michigan. Flat. It's about 600. We should be at least 40% higher with more opportunity here. And it's because we've walked away and had these silly fights because we weren't worried about what counts. And that is making this place a place where you want to raise your family. You have good values. You can, let your kid go to school and not be afraid of what they're teaching them in the classroom. And that you can understand that the government's there to protect them, not come after them with their, like the DOJ and the FBI. That's what we need to focus on. That's certainly what I'm going to focus on in this election.
Did I hear you correctly? You're just going to do 2 terms and you're willing to step down after that?
2 terms. I did it voluntarily in Congress, served 14 years.
Wow.
I've already proven I'm maybe the only guy that says that's actually done it.
Mike, that's impressive.
Yeah.
That is to me, because I believe in term limits. Like, we don't want the people in there like when they're 80s and 90s and everything else that's been in politics for 75 years, it seems like. I think that's going to resonate to a lot of people. And like I said, they may not agree with you on some of the issues, but if we all can come together and agree with 80% of the issues, I think we're moving in the right direction.
And I think they'd be surprised how much they agree with me.
Yeah. And
most of the time, they just haven't had an opportunity to get to know me, or really, there's a lot of people who have narrative on what the record they think it is. It's just simply isn't true.
And I think it's huge that you came on the show today, especially with the Grassroots Army, and just was transparent. You didn't run away from any of the questions. So you came on here and you took a hits and then answered them and moved forward. I got one little question for you. I'm going to put you on the spot. Have some fun.
Yeah.
There's a lot of rumors for governor here in the state of Michigan. Who's your horse?
You know what? I don't have a horse. And my wife would joke that every time I go to a horse farm, there's always one more horse's ass than horse on the farm. But she said you should figure out who that is. I'm just saying. Listen, I think we got some great candidates. I hope we work it out. If this is a bloody primary, I worry about us winning. I will tell you this one thing. So, given that we understand how to build a ground game like no other candidate here in Michigan, and I'll also put that to the test. We're going to do that again. We're going to build this massive ground game operation. Whoever comes out of the governor's primary, we want to help them plug into it because they'll be battered. Well, this is what happened to us. We got battered. We were bruised. We came out of that thing. We had to kind of rebuild. We just didn't have enough time.
Yeah.
If we're going to get started early, we're going to go long. We're going to build this thing. And whoever comes out, we're doing this together. I don't care who it is. We're doing this together. Because it's so important for the future of this state and our families and our future and our economy and our job base here that we get it right, that we're going to do this together. And to me, if we do this, rather than spending all our time arguing with each other, we're going to win. Democrats just have a terrible track record, and we're going to have to point it out to people.
Yeah, well said. If we just do that and hold them accountable and make them answer. They don't want to answer it. Make them answer, and that's how we win this thing, is this great messaging, coming together as a team, and again, coming together after the primary, regardless of whether or not you agree with that person 100% of the time or not, is get behind the Republican ticket, up and down the ticket. And I look forward to watching the good news on Monday.
Don't be seduced by those who are saying that they know better or more conservative, or the libertarians who want to drift you off. They do it on purpose. Don't be seduced by that. We're going to win this because we're coming together as conservatives and Republicans. We are going to be the future of this state.
So you are running?
Well, I'll tell you on Monday.
Hey, sir, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary. I really appreciate it. Thanks for all you do. Thanks for keeping listen. It is so important that you have these hard conversations. You talk to all of the folks who are going to make a difference for our state. Thanks for doing it. Really important.
You betcha, sir. Have a great day and say hello to your wife.
And by the way, I'm going to say this to your listeners because I saw you on the. He is so good. I had multiple occasions to bump into him around the state, everywhere from I think Houghton, Michigan, to to the southeast, to the southwest. This guy connects with a crowd like nobody I've seen. So I hope you stay engaged and active and keep participating. Really important for the future.
I appreciate that, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Have a great day. Well, that was a good interview. All right. And I respect, just like I said, I may not agree with a lot of Mike's past or what he's done, but he was willing to come on my show. And I felt that I've asked him some very tough questions that a lot of people don't ask. And I hope that you guys stayed throughout that entire interview. He answered some, that's for sure. And I'm hoping it puts to rest a lot of the stuff that I've been seeing online. And I'll continue to try to do my part, is bring great people on here and allow them the platforms to explain what they want to do and hold them accountable. And that's going to be my job here this next cycle. So we're going to see how that all kind of plays out. But a lot of people are running, and there's going to be even more people in the race, not only in governor, but in Senate. So not everyone has announced just yet. There are lots of rumors of some other people that are going to be putting their hat in the arena, as they say, and we'll find out who they are, and I will be inviting them all on the show. I did hear that the John James team wants to come on the show, and if John James's team is listening, yeah, you guys send me a text, follow up. I would love to have John on and talk about some things on why he decided to run, especially with his voting record and everything else in the past. And if you guys are willing to come on the Grassroots Army podcast and have an open conversation to the hundreds of thousands of people that follow me, absolutely. I would love to have you on. Just reach out and we'll get it scheduled. All right, folks, have a great day. God bless you. God bless the state of Michigan. Of course, and always, God bless these United States. Until next time.